I was sitting in my cherry red convertible outside the Starbucks on Maple Ridge Drive, engine idling, top down, enjoying the 72-degree weather while Boston's More Than a Feeling played through my speakers. That's when I noticed movement in my peripheral vision. Before I could even turn my head completely, Barbara Kessler, the president of our HOA, had vaulted over my passenger door like some kind of suburban ninja and planted herself in my leather seat with the confidence of someone who just conquered a small nation. "Drive me to the community center immediately," she commanded, pointing forward like a general directing troops into battle. My electric scooter battery died, and my husband took our Tesla to his golf tournament. "I have an emergency board meeting about unauthorized garden gnome placements in exactly 12 minutes. She actually snapped her fingers at me twice, the sound sharp and entitled in the morning air. I stared at her for a solid 5 seconds, my vanilla latte frozen halfway to my lips. "Barbara," I said slowly, trying to process what had just happened, "you literally just jumped into my car without permission. That's not how any of this works." She adjusted her oversized sunglasses and smoothed her blazer with HOA President embroidered on the pocket in gold thread. As the duly elected president of Pine Valley Estates Homeowners Association for the past 7 years, she said with a tone that suggested she was explaining basic math to a toddler, "I have executive transit privileges during community emergencies as outlined in subsection 47B of our neighborhood covenant. Now drive. We're wasting valuable enforcement time." I set down my coffee carefully in the cup holder and pulled out my phone. The 911 operator who answered sounded like she'd been having a boring morning until I explained that the president of my HOA had just commandeered my vehicle and was refusing to leave. 20 minutes later, Barbara was in handcuffs trying to explain executive transit privileges to Officer Daniels, who looked like he was trying very hard not to laugh while reading her rights. But let me back up and explain how I ended up with the neighborhood's most notorious HOA president getting arrested in my passenger seat. My name is Mitchell Brennan, and I'm a 41-year-old software developer who works from home. I moved to Pine Valley Estates 3 years ago, attracted by the mature oak trees, the well-maintained common areas, and what the real estate agent called a vibrant community atmosphere. What she failed to mention was that vibrant was code for ruled with an iron fist by Barbara Kessler. Barbara was 53 years old, stood 5'2" in her sensible pumps, and carried a clipboard everywhere she went like it was a royal scepter. She'd been running unopposed for HOA president since 2017 because anyone who even thought about challenging her would mysteriously receive 17 violation notices within a week. She once fined the Johnsons $800 for having their trash cans visible from the street for 37 minutes after the approved retrieval window. She measured grass height with an actual ruler every Tuesday. She had a color-coded spreadsheet of every resident's violations dating back a decade. My problems with Barbara started innocently enough 6 months ago when I decided to repaint my front door. I'd chosen a deep navy blue, which I thought looked sophisticated against my home's gray siding. The paint had barely dried when Barbara appeared on my doorstep with her clipboard and a frown that could curdle milk. "Mr. Brennan," she announced like a judge delivering a death sentence, "navy blue is not on the approved color palette for exterior doors as clearly stated in Section 12, subsection C of our architectural guidelines. You have 72 hours to repaint in one of the 17 approved shades or face daily fines of $100. I tried reasoning with her, showing her that my navy was virtually identical to the approved colonial blue on her little color chart, but Barbara pulled out an actual spectrometer from her purse and proved it was 3 shades darker. That's when I knew I was dealing with someone who had way too much time on her hands and a desperate need for therapy. I repainted the door, but our relationship was permanently soured. Over the next few months, Barbara seemed to make it her personal mission to find violations on my property. My mailbox was reportedly 2 degrees off perpendicular. My driveway had an oil stain the size of a quarter that was deemed an aesthetic violation. She even tried to fine me for excessive butterfly attraction because my lavender bushes were, and I quote, creating an unregulated pollinator congregation zone. The situation escalated dramatically 2 weeks before the convertible incident. Barbara had sent out a mass email declaring that all residents must attend a mandatory Saturday morning seminar on proper hedge trimming techniques. The email, written in all caps with multiple red exclamation points, threatened violation notices for anyone who didn't attend. I responded politely that I had a prior commitment, which was actually just my plan to sleep past 6 a.m. on a weekend for once in my life. Barbara did not take this well. She showed up at my door at 6:30 that Saturday morning with a portable speaker and played the Pine Valley Estates official anthem, which was apparently a thing that existed, at maximum volume until I answered. When I opened the door in my pajamas, she thrust a 150-page bound manual about hedge maintenance into my hands and informed me that my absence had been noted in the permanent record. I didn't even have hedges. The following Monday, I found a violation notice on my windshield for automotive flamboyance because my convertible's red color was deemed too festive for a residential setting. On Tuesday, there was another notice for repeated top-down infractions suggesting my open convertible top was creating a draft hazard for neighboring properties. By Wednesday, she'd invented an entirely new violation category called vehicular nonconformity and tried to fine me $300. I started keeping a folder of all her ridiculous notices, partly for potential legal action but mostly because they were so absurd they were almost entertaining. My favorite was a citation for nocturnal luminosity excess because my porch light was apparently 0.5 watts over the recommended brightness guidelines. She'd actually come to my house at 10 p.m. with a light meter to measure it. The day before the convertible incident, Barbara had sent out another mass email, this time announcing Emergency Protocol 7, which nobody had ever heard of. According to her email, this protocol granted the HOA board emergency powers during what she called periods of community aesthetic crisis. The crisis in question was that the Garcias had planted pink roses instead of red ones, and apparently, this threatened the entire visual harmony of our neighborhood. This brings us back to that fateful Thursday morning when Barbara decided my convertible was her personal Uber. After she'd jumped into my car and demanded I drive her to the community center, I'd remained remarkably calm. I slowly reached for my phone while she ranted about the importance of her emergency board meeting. She was so focused on explaining her fictional transit privileges that she didn't even notice me dialing 911 until I was already talking to the dispatcher. "Hello," I said in my most pleasant voice while Barbara's face turned an interesting shade of purple. "I'd like to report a trespassing and attempted vehicle theft in progress at the Starbucks on Maple Ridge Drive. The perpetrator is currently sitting in my vehicle refusing to exit." I made eye contact with Barbara as I continued. She's about 5'2", gray hair in a bob cut, wearing a navy blazer with HOA President embroidered on it. "Yes, I'll stay on the line." Barbara's voice rose to a pitch that probably scared nearby dogs. "You cannot call the police on me," she shrieked. "I am a duly elected official conducting official HOA business." She actually tried to grab my phone, but I held it out of her reach. "This is mutiny. This is insurrection. I'll have you expelled from Pine Valley Estates." "Ma'am," I said calmly, still talking to the dispatcher, "the perpetrator is now attempting to assault me and take my phone. Please send officers immediately." "Yes, I feel threatened." "No, she does not appear to be armed unless you count a clipboard as a weapon." 2 police cruisers arrived within 8 minutes, which had to be some kind of record. Officers Daniels and Ramirez approached my vehicle with the kind of caution usually reserved for actual dangerous criminals, which seemed excessive given that Barbara's most lethal weapon was her ability to cite municipal codes from memory. Officer Daniels, a tall man with kind eyes and a mustache that belonged in the 1980s, leaned against my driver's side door. "Good morning, sir," he said professionally. "You reported someone trespassing in your vehicle?" I nodded and pointed at Barbara, who had her arms crossed and was glaring at everyone within a 50-foot radius. Officer Daniels walked around to the passenger side. "Ma'am, I need you to exit the vehicle immediately." Barbara straightened her blazer and lifted her chin defiantly. "Officer," she began in her most condescending tone, "I am the president of the Pine Valley Estates Homeowners Association, and I have full authority under subsection 47B of our community guidelines to requisition resident vehicles during declared emergencies." She actually pulled out a laminated card from her purse and waved it at him. "I have jurisdiction here." Officer Ramirez, who looked about 12 years old but was probably 25, had to turn away to hide his smirk. Officer Daniels maintained his composure admirably. "Ma'am, that's not how the law works. HOA rules don't override state and federal laws. You need to exit this gentleman's vehicle immediately or you'll be placed under arrest for trespassing." Barbara clutched her clipboard to her chest like a shield. "This is a conspiracy," she declared loud enough for the growing crowd of onlookers to hear. "Mr. Brennan has been conducting a campaign of violations against our community standards, and now he's weaponizing law enforcement against legitimate HOA activities." She turned to the crowd. "You all know me. I've maintained property values in this neighborhood for 7 years. Ma'am, Officer Daniels said with the patience of a saint. "This is your last warning. Exit the vehicle voluntarily or you will be removed and arrested." Barbara responded by clicking her seatbelt firmly into place and gripping the door handle with both hands. "Very well," Officer Daniels sighed. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for criminal trespassing and attempted unauthorized use of a motor vehicle." What followed was perhaps the most dignified yet ridiculous arrest I've ever witnessed. Barbara refused to unlock her seatbelt, requiring Officer Ramirez to reach across her while she shouted about violation of HOA sovereignty, which is definitely not a real thing. When they finally got her out of my car, she demanded they allow her to file a formal complaint against me with the HOA board before taking her to jail. Officer Daniels informed her she could file all the complaints she wanted from the police station. As they placed her in handcuffs, Barbara maintained her composure enough to shout instructions to the gathering crowd. "Contact Vice President Reynolds," she called out. "Tell him to implement Emergency Protocol 7 immediately. Document this illegal detention. Check subsection 47B. Several people were recording on their phones, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't for the reasons Barbara hoped. The story exploded on our neighborhood's social media page within hours. Someone posted the video with the title "HOA President Attempts Grand Theft Auto, Gets Arrested Instead," and it got over 300 comments in the first hour. Turns out I wasn't the only one who'd been victimized by Barbara's reign of terror. People started sharing their own stories of ridiculous fines and made-up violations. Tom Morrison posted about being fined for aggressive lawn maintenance because his grass was too green compared to his neighbors. Sarah Kim shared a notice she'd received for unauthorized squirrel feeding because she had a bird feeder that squirrels occasionally visited. The Hendersons revealed they'd been cited for excessive holiday cheer for having their Christmas lights up until January 2nd, which was apparently 2 days past the acceptable festive period. The emergency HOA board meeting that Barbara had been rushing to was still held, but with a very different agenda. Vice President Reynolds, a mild-mannered accountant who'd only taken the position because nobody else would, called the meeting to order in Barbara's absence. The first item on the agenda was Barbara's immediate suspension pending criminal proceedings. The vote was unanimous, including from board members who'd been too terrified to oppose her before. I was asked to testify at a special board hearing the following week. I brought my folder of ridiculous violations, including the automotive flamboyance citation and the nocturnal luminosity excess notice. I also presented security camera footage from my doorbell camera showing Barbara measuring my grass with a ruler at 5 a.m. on multiple occasions. The board was horrified to learn about Emergency Protocol 7 and Barbara's claimed transit privileges, neither of which existed in any actual HOA documentation. The criminal case moved forward over the next 2 months. Barbara hired an expensive lawyer who tried to argue that she had implied consent to enter my vehicle based on community standards and practices. The prosecutor, a no-nonsense woman named Jennifer Park, presented it simply as breaking and entering into a vehicle, which is exactly what it was. Barbara's own emails and recorded statements about her executive transit privileges actually worked against her, showing clear intent to take my vehicle without permission. During the trial, more of Barbara's abuse of power came to light. She'd been embezzling HOA funds to pay for her spectrometer and other enforcement equipment. She'd created fake violations to generate revenue, pocketing some of the fines. She'd even used HOA money to hire a private investigator to follow residents she suspected of violations, which explained how she always knew when someone's trash cans were out 30 seconds too long. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Barbara was found guilty of criminal trespassing, attempted unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, and misappropriation of HOA funds. The judge, clearly tired of what he called the most ridiculous case of HOA overreach he'd seen in 30 years on the bench, sentenced Barbara to 6 months in jail, suspended to time served and 2 years probation. She was also ordered to pay $25,000 in restitution to the HOA and $5,000 in damages to me for harassment. But the legal consequences were just the beginning. Barbara was permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in the state. She was required to complete 100 hours of community service, specifically helping people she'd wrongfully fined over the years. She also had to attend a 12-week course on boundaries and appropriate leadership, which the judge specifically noted should focus on the difference between community service and tyranny. The professional consequences were even more devastating for Barbara. She'd been working as an office manager for a local real estate firm, and when news of her arrest and conviction spread, she was immediately terminated. Her employer cited reputational damage and concerns about her judgment and ethics. Her real estate license was also suspended pending review, effectively ending her career in property management. The final HOA board meeting to officially remove Barbara from her position was standing room only. Vice President Reynolds read the resolution removing her from office and banning her from attending any HOA meetings for 5 years. When he finished reading, Barbara stood up from her seat in the back of the room, her face a mask of disbelief and rage. "You can't do this," she shouted, her voice cracking. "I've given 7 years of my life to maintaining standards in this community. Without me, property values will plummet. You'll have chaos, anarchy, pink roses everywhere." Security escorted her out as she continued shouting about the coming aesthetic apocalypse. As the door closed behind her, the room erupted in applause. Someone had brought a cake that said "Freedom from Tyranny" in green frosting. The Garcia family brought their pink roses and handed them out to everyone as a symbol of our newfound independence. Barbara's financial situation deteriorated rapidly after the conviction. The $25,000 restitution payment wiped out most of her savings. The legal fees from her criminal defense attorney cost another $30,000. She had to sell her Lexus SUV and downgrade to a used Honda Civic. The ultimate irony was when she received a violation notice from the new HOA board for leaving her garbage cans out past the retrieval window, a rule she herself had implemented. The fine was $50, and she had to pay it like everyone else. The last time I saw Barbara was at the grocery store 6 months after her conviction. She was working as a cashier, her HOA president blazer replaced with a polyester uniform and name tag. When she saw me approaching her checkout line with my groceries, her face went through several emotions in rapid succession, including anger, embarrassment, and finally resignation. She rang up my items in complete silence until the very end when she was required by store policy to ask if I'd found everything I needed. I simply nodded, paid, and left without saying a word. As I walked away, I heard her supervisor remind her to smile more with customers. The woman who once ruled our neighborhood with an iron fist was now being told how to do her job by a 20-year-old shift manager. She looked utterly defeated, her empire of citations and violations reduced to scanning barcodes for $8.50 an hour.